Darla Cooper. I'm the executive director of an organization called the Research and Planning Group for California Community Colleges. And I'm here to share with you part 2 of a research study that we're working on. I was here a year ago. Anybody happen to see that presentation? Okay, well, I'll catch you up. So we came last year just to kind of present our initial findings. We've got some additional findings that I'll be sharing with you today, and then I hope to come back next year to share the ultimate findings, what everybody's really waiting to hear from, which is the students. But I'll explain all of that. Again, very briefly, the Research and Planning Group, we are an independent nonprofit organization, and it works very closely with the California Community College system. We do professional development, research, like what I'm going to share with you today, evaluation, and technical assistance. So that's who we are. This particular project is funded by the College Futures Foundation. We're very grateful for their assistance and their partnership in this. They didn't just write a check, but they're really helping us design the work, and they're going to be a very vital part of getting it out once we've finished the whole project. So I said I won't read all of this to you, and if I'm in anybody's way, please just tell me to move, because it's hard for me to judge where I should stand. Is this better? I'm thinking about the people over here. Can you see the slides if I stand here? Okay. So, of course, now I can't see that. That's the problem. So I'll look this way. So, again, we're really hoping that you get something out of this presentation in terms of this particular population of students that are probably on your community college campuses, and give you some ideas, hopefully, to walk away with in terms of things that you can do to help this population. So again, I'm going to do a very brief recap of the presentation I did last year, just to kind of catch you up on that first phase of the study. Then I'm going to go into what else we found when we dug a little bit deeper, and then share with you what our plans are for finishing up this study. So it's called Through the Gate, imagining that getting through that university to transfer is a gate that students have to kind of pass through. And so we started with this idea of, just from other research we had done and other research we had seen, that there was a population of students out there who were completing all or most of their transfer requirements, but then not transferring. And it's a head scratcher, right? You're just kind of going, why would you spend all that time and money and effort to take all those classes and then not transfer? What's stopping you, right? So we just thought that there's probably this population out there, but we didn't know for certain because no one had ever really looked at this population. So our initial research was really just to identify, is this a problem? Are there enough students, who fit this category for us to really be worried about and for us to need to do something about? So that's really where we started from. And ultimately, our goal is, I describe it twofold. Obviously, the students that we do find in this situation, if we can help them, those actual students, then let's do that. But also, how do we help the students that are coming up behind them not get stuck in that same place? What can we do from day one, and maybe even reaching back into the high schools, that would have helped these students not get stuck there, right? So that's kind of where we're coming from with this. So that's fun. Okay. This is what happens when other people put together your PowerPoints. Anyway, so again, very quickly, the phase 1 was, again, just that initial research question, is this worth studying? And then phase 2, assuming that the answer to the first phase was yes, is taking a deeper dive into the data, and also to go and actually talk to these students and find out from them why they haven't transferred. So I will take you through what we designed to kind of think of transfer, and not in a kind of dichotomous way in terms of you've transferred or you haven't, but that there's a continuum, a path to transfer. So I'll walk you through this, and this is how it leads into how we design this study. So this is a hierarchical one. So you start at the top with the young woman in yellow, who we call our transfer achiever. That one's pretty straightforward. It's anyone who's transferred. And again, it's hierarchical, meaning that if you meet that requirement, then you're in that group. Done. Doesn't matter whether you were, because you were probably in all of these groups or most of these groups on your way to that. But again, this study is built on your highest achievement. So transfer being our ultimate goal, Then we had a group of students who had transferred. And then next is what we call at the gate. So again, that's if you kind of picture someone who's literally standing at the gate, but they haven't crossed through it. And so these are the students who, based on our requirements in California, have met, as near as we can tell, from the data we have, they've met all the requirements for transfer, which in our state, and this is based on, because most of our students go to our public universities, based on their requirements, which are 60 units, 60 transferable units, with a 2.0 GPA, and you have completed both your transfer level English and transfer level math classes. So that's what we call, we also call that transfer ready. You're ready to go, right? So that's the next group down. Then we have this gentleman here in purple who we call our near the gate students. And the only difference between at the gate and near the gate is that the students in the near the gate class have not completed both math and English. They may have one, they may have the other, they may have neither. Okay, but they're missing that key requirement to be transfer ready. Okay. Oh, I forgot to mention, sorry, in this group here, we have a degree in California called an ADT, stands for Associate Degree for Transfer. How many California people in the room? Oh, that's, okay, good. Oh, sorry, that's not an insult. That's, when I did this last year, most of the people in the room were from California, so I'm glad to see you. I don't want to say non-Californians. That sounds, yeah, that doesn't sound good. You other people, no, that sounds good. That sounds awful too. Anybody want to help me out? You people from all over the United States. Is that better? Okay, I got some nods that time. All right. Well, yes. I have to bring you the mic, yes.
I just wanted a little clarity on a comment you made just a second ago that you said transfer ready, and it means that the student has taken their English and math. Now, the English would be 1101 and 1102. What would the math be other than college algebra?
We have a variety of courses that meet that requirement. It could be college algebra, it could be pre-calculus, or higher, obviously calculus. It includes statistics, transfer level statistics.
It depends upon the student.
Exactly, whether they're a STEM major, social major, those kinds of things. Good question. Anybody else have a question while I'm standing here? No? Okay. So I was saying we have this degree called Associate Degree for Transfer, and it's an arrangement that the California Community College System made with the California State University, which is where most of our students transfer. That basically is a guaranteed admission. If you get this degree, and that obviously there's requirements embedded in getting a degree, but if you get this degree, you get automatic guaranteed admission to a California State University. Not necessarily one you want to go to, not necessarily in the major you want to study, but you are guaranteed to get in somewhere. And we're going to talk about how that's great, but not necessarily for every student. Okay. So those first three that I just described, those are the ones that are really in our study. But again, we pulled data for the entire state, so we had to figure out, felt like we needed to acknowledge the rest of the students in the whole population that we drew. So we created this group here called Momentum students, and it was just to acknowledge that students who had at least 45 but fewer than 60 units, they have momentum. They've done a lot of the work, but not quite as close as the other two groups. And we didn't feel right lumping them in with students who may only have 12 units. So it was just more of an acknowledgement that these students had momentum, and so we wanted to kind of put them in a category acknowledging that. The last group, which is the bulk of our students, unfortunately, we call them transfer explorers. And they're the students who have between 12 and 44 transferable units over a 6-year period. So there's no one in this group that has been in our system for fewer than 6 years. Because again, the question would come up, they only have 30 units. They're not even done yet, right? You haven't given them enough time to have reached 60 units. Well, we use a 6-year measure, for graduation rates. We figured that was fair in order to categorize these students here. Does that make sense in terms of the fact that we wanted to make sure that we weren't excluding anyone who was still really plugging away? Not that these students aren't still plugging away. They're just maybe at a slower pace. And others of them have just given up, at least for now. Okay. But again, our study is about the first three. So very quickly, let me tell you what we found. So out of those three groups, most of them transferred. Yay! 2/3 of them transferred. Anybody excited about that number? I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't be. Because this is not a transfer rate. Because transfer rate starts counting from freshmen. In this number, all of these people have 60 units. So if that change your mind, if the denominator is people who have at least 60 units and only 2/3 of them have transferred, I would hope to get something close to at least 80% among students who have gotten that far, right? If we had 66% transfer rates from freshmen, we're going to have a party. We're going to celebrate. We're going to sing it from the rooftops. But I'm not saying this is bad. I'm just saying it should be better because this deck is stacked. These are the students who have already gotten really far. And we're still only 2/3 are transferring. So again, here's the answer to that first question I told you about. Almost 300,000 students in a 5-year period met our criteria of being at or near the gate. We thought that was significant. Again, California's a big state. We're the biggest educational system, California community college system in the nation. But still, 300,000 people are sitting there with all of these courses and no degree. In some cases, I'll get to that in a minute. No, they didn't go on to transfer. What's going on? Why aren't they transferring? So again, this is the very brief overview of some of the key findings from phase 1, and then I'm going to get into the deeper dive. So I mentioned, here's what's interesting. So most of the people who transferred didn't go with a degree. Is that true in most of your states? Most of the people who transfer don't have a degree? All right, let's see how it is. How many people, most of your students transfer without a degree? And the rest transfer with a degree? And then the rest of you are uncertain. Okay. Well, that's kind of depressing because when I've talked to students, the truth is life gets in the way, right? And so transfer is not your end goal as a student. Students don't transfer and go, woo, I'm done. No, you transfer to get that bachelor's degree, right? But what happens if you don't transfer? Or what happens if you transfer, like these students, but you don't finish, or you don't finish when you expected or when you hoped? What do you have? You got a transcript with a bunch of courses on it. Maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 transcripts, depending on how many institutions you've attended. But what does that say to an employer? Can't finish, right? So I try to encourage students when it's possible, because I don't know about you all, but a lot of times our associate degree requirements don't line up with our transfer requirements. And I would never encourage a student to take extra time and spend extra money just to get an associate's degree. But if it can line up, and you, especially with this new ADT, the associate degree for transfer, if you can make it happen and you can walk away with that associate's degree, do it. Because then you'll have it in your back pocket. I even had a student describe that to me. They said, yeah, you got to have your associate's degree. You got to put that in your back pocket while you're, pursuing transfer. And I'm like, that kid gets it. Awesome. Here's one for you. I don't know if anyone skipped ahead and read. 75% of African American students in that group, right? They're either at, near, or have right? That denominator, same denominator, transfer. What was the rate for all students? Huh? Anybody getting it? You starting to get it? Does this sound counter to what you usually hear for statistics for African Americans? Would you be surprised to know they're number 1 of all ethnicities? Which says to me, if you get them to a certain point, I don't know exactly what that point is. That's a different study. I hope somebody will pay for it one day. But that's it. There's some kind of tipping point for African American students. If you get them to that, they're going to finish. They're going to meet their goal. And I recently did a study with some students who had transferred from a California community college to historically black colleges and universities. And it came through. I mean, it had nothing to do with a separate study, but it came through in talking to them. There was a lot of talk, a lot of what they said kind of had this attitude of, oh, I've come too far. There's no one is going to stop me. Nothing is going to stop me. I am going to finish, come you know what or high water, right? I heard that over and over and over again. But like I said, where is that tipping point? That's why we need to do some research and figure out. Because the little preliminary stuff that I did when I found this, we lose most of them within the first 30 units for sure, and a lot within the first 12. So most of them don't make it to 60 units, and that's the problem. Okay. So when we looked at our at the gate students, again, these are the ones that are right there. They seem to have done all the work. Most of them left us without a degree or certificate. Okay. Latino students were more likely to be in this group than have transferred. So they're likely to have seemingly finished all their work, but then not transferred. And I've seen some other research that's come up with something similar to where they were least likely to transfer compared to other ethnicities. They were also most likely to get that degree for transfer. It's literally in the title, and then not transfer. See, where it's kind of like, what is happening here? And then again, our near the gate students, remember these are the ones that have everything but the English and math. Most of them are missing math. And this number here, 92, kind of splits down the middle in terms of half are just missing math and half are missing math and English, right? But anybody think math, you guys have issues with math on your campuses? Okay, so it's not just California? No? Okay. Again, nearly half of them have left us without any kind of degree or certificate. And this one is really interesting because we kind of were like, well, it's kind of another tipping point question. Is there a point where if you don't, once you've hit one of these markers, right? Once you've become transfer ready, is there a point where like the clock starts? And if you don't transfer within that time period, your chances of transferring go down. And that's what we found. And it's a year. Once students meet these requirements, if they don't transfer within a year, it's literally like it's a professional term within research and researchers in the room. No? Okay. Oh, one. Okay. The data fell off a cliff. And so you can kind of picture a line graph where the data are kind of going and then it just goes like this. And that's what happened with this. So it's like everybody who had transferred within a year of hitting this milestone. And then it just really plummeted, and just very few students transferred 2 years later, 3 years later, 4 years later. Okay, so that's the summary of what we found. The first, yes, sir. Oh, hold on. I'm a-coming.
Thanks. Two questions. One is about your sample, and were these degree certificate seeking students, or just sort of clarify that, or what their goal was, if you knew? I know we talked a little bit about this the other day. The other thing is, Peter Barr came out with a study today. Did you see it on California data on non-completers? And the takeaway was that those with CTE credits have great returns. So non-completers, right? So I'm just wondering if you know of all of the near completers here. Do you know what proportion of their credits and courses were CTE, that type of thing, that where they might have gone into the workforce? Do you have any information on that?
Let me answer the first question. I'm gonna walk back up here. Okay. So to answer the first question, we do collect information on student goal, but I'm going to show you some findings later where you're going to really understand why it's problematic. It's not informed. And so we as researchers know to not really use it because it's not valid. We don't do a good job of collecting students' intent. So I'm going to show you what we have, but like I said, when I show you the findings, you're going to go, huh? Because that's what I did when I saw them, because they're counterintuitive. So we have it, but it's not terribly reliable. The second question about CTE, we don't know. We probably could look to see the proportion, but again, these are transferable units. So most of people pursuing a CTE like degree, like an AS degree, A lot of those units aren't transferable. And again, you have to have 60 of those transferable units to be included. So we were hoping that we excluded a lot, not all, but a lot of the CTE focused ones. But the question is, what about the ones who never intended to transfer? We don't know. Again, we have the information, but again, you'll see, we don't actually know. Does that answer? Okay. All right, so what else did we find? So again, we wanted to take a deeper dive in a couple ways. One, again, the first time around, we only looked at ethnicity, race, region, maybe a couple other things that didn't, well, we tried to look at major. That was another field that was a disaster in our data. Some colleges were missing it. So we had to toss it, unfortunately, because we know major affects it, but if you don't have good data, it's not a lot. You can't really include it in something like this. But we went and did all these presentations, and one of the questions we would ask the audience is, what else? What else should we be looking at? And they gave us lots of wonderful feedback, some of which we have data, quantitative data, so we put it in this model. Other pieces we got from them are going to be in that phase 2 when we go talk to the students. Right? So this is the quantitative piece expanded. The second thing we expanded was, the first time around it was just descriptive statistics. So just counts and percentages and means, and not looking for any kind of statistical significance. So the second thing we did for this second part of this quantitative study was add inferential statistics, and where we did a regression analysis. So again, this is our purpose of trying to take that deep, we're calling it the deeper dive into the data. And we're comparing those 3 groups. And transfer is the reference group. So we're really trying to find out which students are more likely to either be at the gate or transfer, or be near the gate or transfer. So we did 2 separate regressions for that. So here are the factors that we looked at. And I'll read some of them because I don't know how easy it is to see these in the back. So we kept, obviously, the race, gender, and age was a new one that we added in this case. We also looked at our special population groups, and for, again, EOPS is like an extended opportunity. It's for low income. They call it, I think the actual language, which needs to change, but I'll just tell you what it says, economically and academically disadvantaged students. And so you all might have similar types of programs on your campuses. Yes, no? Probably don't call it EOPS, but you might have something that's geared towards those populations. DSPS is our disabled students and programs and services. So disabled students, students with where English is not their first language, and first generation students, right? And then we looked at some academic issues, like what is their goal? We looked at it. It's in here. What's their cumulative GPA, whether they had earned an associate's degree, not an ADT, but an associate's degree in Associates of Art or Science. And then we looked at region. And in the light gray, those were the reference groups. For all the others, the reference group was the not, right? So you were in EOPS or not. You were a veteran or not. For race, ethnicity, white was the reference group. And for region, San Diego was the reference group because it had the highest transfer rate among all the different regions. So we put that as the reference group to see if any other regions were different from that. We also factored in some college and university factors to see if where you are, not just region, but like what's going on in your region might affect it. So again, we looked at the admission rate of CSU, again, because that's where most students transfer. There's some exceptions and issues with this, especially in a place like Santa Barbara, where the nearest public university is a UC, and so most students go to that. But I said we went with the predominant, right? I said I forget what the number is, but most of our students transfer to a CSU. We looked at the number of ADTs a particular college had, which was kind of a sign of how easy it may be for students to transfer to a CSU. How large the FTS is, how large the school is. Are we looking at a tiny school, a large school, those kinds of things. Higher education density was like how many public higher education institutions are in your region? Because I don't know how many of you are familiar with the geography of California, but some of our regions are pretty far out there. And the nearest, the winner, I don't think it's in this, I was just looking at the report. We have one community college where the nearest public university is 200 miles away. Okay? So that might affect your ability to go if you can't afford a private, if you can't get enough financial aid, because there's private universities you can probably get to closer than that, but not public. So we wanted to look at, well, how many choices do you have? Again, if you're in an urban area, if you're in LA, there's lots of places for you to go. If you're in a rural area, there might only be one.
I just want to clarify. I'm from Florida, where our quote-unquote ADT is our AA degree. And so are you saying that you have 3 different associates? And if so, what's the difference between the AA and the ADT?
Guaranteed admission to the CSU. Yeah, there are a number of colleges who have replaced their AA degree with an ADT, so they don't even offer the AA anymore, but a lot of colleges still offer both. Probably. I'm sure someone, the AS is pretty clear, right? But the AA, if you get an AA in English, no offense to any English majors out there, but I'd say the same thing about psychology, which was my bachelor's degree. Even the bachelor's degree in psychology doesn't get you a job in psychology. It can get you a job, but not necessarily in psychology. So I think that is a valid question that I don't have an answer to, but thank you for asking and bringing that up. I appreciate it. It's a good point. And then I think I mentioned this one about miles to the nearest thing. So this is what we looked at, and here's what we found. So I had to have them, my people created this, and I wrote to them and went, huh? So I'm going to walk you through it as I had them walk me through it. So this top row are all those factors that came up as statistically significant difference, right? In terms of these groups were more likely to be at the gate or near the gate. So both then have transferred. So again, the 2 separate regressions, they came up more likely to be stuck than to have transferred, all right? So we've got students who are older, Hispanic students, disabled students, first-generation students. Anyone being surprised by any of this? Our limited English proficiency, our EOPS, again, academically or economically disadvantaged. I'm going to come back to this one because this is the confusing one. And then our Central Valley, which is kind of literally in the central part of our state, and it's very, very rural, and places are pretty spread out. And I said I'm going to come back. Down here on this row, these are groups that were only more likely to be near the gate or at the gate, but not both, right? So here, Native American students were more likely to be near the gate than transfer, but they weren't more likely to be at the gate, okay? Same thing here in the reverse. Males, not Asian males, but males and Asian students were more likely to be at the gate than to have transferred, okay? And then same thing down there. Those 2 regions in our state were more likely to only be at the gate than to have transferred. So I said I'm going to come back to this, which is back to your question about goal. So I'm going to try to walk you through this because this was another one we were spinning because there's an intuitiveness to this that didn't make any kind of sense. So what this says is if a student had a goal, an educational goal of transfer, they were actually more likely to be at or near the gate, both, than to have transferred. Well, that makes sense on one level because they're pursuing transfer. So they'd probably be more likely to be in that group than students who weren't pursuing transfer. Okay, all right, I can go with that. Then we have students who got an AA or AS are also more likely to be at or near the gate than to have transferred. So I said, well, does that mean that most of them in this group didn't have transfer as their goal in the first place? Right? Getting kind of back to your question. So they've got their degree, so I could see how they might get stuck, but they're not really stuck because they met their goal. Well, the problem is when we cross-tab these, most of the students in that AA thing said their goal was transfer. So you see how this is like super confusing? Like, and I feel like these findings are like crisscrossing at some point to where you're just trying to make sense of it. And this is why I get into the next part of the study. where we just have to go ask them what is going on, because we can't rely on this data, at least the transfer education data. But also when you look at this, it tells you a lot, but it's still, I'm guessing a lot of you still have questions, right? Okay. So we did obviously look at the transfer achievers and said, well, who's most likely to be in these groups? In this group, compared to either being at or near the gate. And so, again, not surprisingly, students with higher GPAs were more likely to have transferred. I don't think that's terribly shocking. Anybody shocked? Okay, good. Our veterans were also more likely to have transferred than to have gotten stuck. That also makes sense to me, because they're on that GI Bill. They've got requirements. They're trying to get done. They're already disciplined, from having been in the military. They're used to stuff. So that one doesn't necessarily surprise me that they were there. But look who shows up again. So again, we had those descriptive statistics, which, sometimes what shows in the descriptive doesn't come out in the inferential. But they were more likely to be transferred than either at or near the gate. So again, if they get that far, they're going to finish. They're going to go through and they're going to go ahead with transfer. Okay? All right. So these are some of our key takeaways when we looked at this and just said, okay, so what? Right? So we looked at this and said, we probably need to look at our assumptions about who's likely to transfer and who's not. Right? I mean, obviously the African American student one comes to mind. Right? But some of those other ones back here, anybody was surprised to see any of these groups? I was a little surprised by this. A little. Not sure what's going on there. The other ones, not, and again, there's this whole whatever that means. Not sure what to make of it. But some of it lines up with our assumptions, but some of it doesn't. And so there could be some issues going on, right, in terms of sense of belonging. And we mean that both at the community college, but also at the university. I don't know if any of you've talked to students, and some of them are concerned about how they're going to make that transition, especially if they've had a very supportive, small, kind of close-in community supporting them in the community college, and then they're going to jump into this giant pool at the university and nobody's going to know their name. And so is that potentially stopping some of our students? I don't know. Affordability. If they're coming from EOPS, which again is students who have high financial need, have they used up all their financial aid and there isn't any left for the university, or not enough left, or they're very concerned about how they're going to afford it, right? So these are things where it's like those data don't answer these questions, but they seem to point to the need to ask these questions, right? And then obviously what we showed with geographic constraints, and that it might be more difficult for students in certain parts of our state to access four-year universities than others. And then this is really what I've been leading up to in terms of getting better directions from the students themselves, by going out and asking them, why haven't you transferred? That's really the question. So what I want to do is I want to stop talking, and I want to hear from you all about, this is kind of the frame, this is the framework that we are intending to use as we look at all the factors, both the ones I've shared with you and the ones we're going to ask students about in our survey and in our interviews. And so I'll put this back up, but I want to show you and have you answer two questions for me. Okay? So again, I'm going to put it back up, but tell me what resonates with you when you look at that framework, and then what might be missing in your eyes. So we're here again. The survey's not done; it's in process. So if there's any real gems that I can get from you, that would be great to help us shape our work. So I'll put this back up, and again, we divided it into student factors and college factors, and tried to put some examples to kind of give you an idea of what we're thinking about. This is not an exhaustive list in any of these categories, but it gives you an idea of how we're defining the factors in those categories. So, anyone, what resonates, what's missing? I might as well come and stand back here. Yes. Oh, wait. You and then.
I think what's missing on the student factor is what I see a lot of times with my students. I'm from a community college, is life events. So a major life event has happened, whether it's an illness of a family member and now they're the primary caregiver, or where they have an illness where they get sick or they get pregnant or whatever. Like, we're missing a major life event.
Okay. Thank you.
Two things. One is we don't know if these students applied and didn't get accepted. So, especially in California, we have impaction. And having a 2.0, 60 units and your math and English completed isn't going to get you into necessarily your campus that's closest to you. And so sometimes these students meet all the requirements, but it's the university factors and the impaction at the university. And especially if they've only had that mindset of, I'm only going to UCLA and I'm going to stay an extra year because I didn't get in this, this time around. Maybe I'll apply next year. We see that a lot in the community college. I'm from Fullerton College, by the way. Hi. Yes. So I was going to say, if there was, any way to kind of look at that when you ask students, did you apply and maybe you didn't get accepted, or you applied and you got accepted somewhere, but not the campus of, where you wanted to go, or the major. And the second thing is we have a very small African-American population at Fullerton. The majority of them, or several of them, I shouldn't say majority, but many of them are in sports and athletics. And so I'm wondering if that is skewing kind of the numbers a little bit, because we found that they're not a disproportionately impacted group for transfer. But I don't know if we've factored for that. Like, the students kind of have a different path to the university.
So I'll answer the second one first, which is we wanted to have athletes in it, but the flag and the data is not good. This is another place where, if you don't have good data, you can't include it because it's just going to mess it up further. But no, that's an excellent question, and we will ask that when we talk to them. Like I said, I haven't seen numbers, but maybe I can find out, and we can put that in the longer report of, well, what percentage of African-American students, at least statewide, are athletes. And that would give us an idea of how much that might be influencing, because obviously athletes, have a very structured, they have requirements, they're motivated to keep themselves eligible. They also have a lot of support, a lot. It's very customized, the community, it's like a learning community in many ways. They have a lot of resources. They often have a dedicated counselor. They obviously have a coaching. They have each other. There's lots of support. And then there's this push to keep them eligible, both their own motivation, but also, the school. It wants to keep them there. So that's an excellent question. And then the first one, yes. The answer is yes. To remind me again, the first part of your question was about, yes. Oh, right. Right. So unfortunately, we in the California Community College System do not have access to that information from the CSUs to find out who applied, who got accepted, where they applied. They don't share that information with us yet. Hopefully one day we can get that. And so unless you, Fullerton, have like an agreement with Cal State Fullerton to share that data, and then you're only going to get the Fullerton picture, not everywhere that your students go. So it would be wonderful if we had access to that. So we're going to have to ask that on the survey. And there's a whole section that asks, have you applied? Where have you applied? Did you get accepted? So yes, we definitely thought about that and actually got some really good input from counselors and transfer center coordinators about how to ask those questions, because there's so many conditional admits. It's like, you can do this, but you can't do that, and you can go here, but you can't go there, and you can study this, but you can't study that, but you can study it here, but you can't study it there. Oh my God. Yeah, so great. Okay, someone else. Remember the questions, resonate or missing? Resonate or missing? Yes. Okay, I'm just going to pass this to you.
I'm curious, when it comes to the educational goals of the students that are being tracked, how and when is that data collected, and is it ever updated? Because we all know the students go through the different life experiences, all those different things, and they could just be selecting the first thing on the list. I mean, how is it presented to them, that type of thing? And then I don't know how the system works in California. I work at Iowa State University, and we get a lot of students who complete an associate's degree and then decide to stay around for another year to complete a second associate's degree, or which would impact obviously the transfer factor and all of those things, and all the data that you're looking at here. So I didn't know if there was a number of students who are coming out with, we do credit hours, I guess students transfer in with 2 associate's degrees and almost 100 credit hours.
All right. So I think I'm going to try to answer. Nope, I already forgot the first question. So I'm going to answer the second one. Yes, we have an excess unit problem. Ours is probably not mostly related to multiple degrees, though. Ours is related to changing your major and having to go in a completely different path and doing that. I think some of it is just students sticking around. Sometimes I've talked to students where they said, I just needed this one class, but in order to stay in EOPS and get access to the benefits there, I got to enroll full time. So I'm taking classes I don't need, because just to stick around for that one class, just to stay eligible, just to keep getting those benefits. So we have a lot of excess unit problems. We do have a lot of students who graduate with multiple degrees, but they're usually at the same time. You'll see it like in the same semester, they'll get 3 or 4 in some cases. So it seems like those things would be related, but they don't seem to be. Again, I haven't done the research, but from the data I have looked at, they're not necessarily related. And then, I'm sorry, the question. Oh, yeah. How's it collected? It is on this massively, you can speak to that application. Oh, my God. Yes, tell them.
No, it's their application when they're enrolling. So right out of high school, they have to, and they're applying to the community college, they have to say what their major is and what their goals are. So a lot of times the students are doing this, last minute. They're not really taking the time to think about what they're putting on the application. They just know they're going to the community college and they have to choose something. So.
Well, we used to. Yeah. Can anybody guess what our most popular major is from the application? No. Nope. Nope. What? No. 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 This is fun. Nope. Accounting. Because it's first. We have a lot of accounting majors who don't want to be accountants. And finish answering your question, is it ever updated? Sometimes, some places, somewhere, it happens to some students. But it's not like this have to. I think some schools are better than others. Sometimes they'll put it in the registration process where, like sometimes you get places and they'll say, is this still your address? Is this still that? So some colleges have that built into their registration process for continuing students where it says, is this still your goal? Is this still your major? But it's not across the board in every college. So this is the problem. So we've always had, whenever we've looked at any kind of completion data, whether it's degrees, whether it's transfer, we're doing it based on behavior. So if our initial group was students who had earned, I think at least probably 12. I think we started with 6, but at least 12 transferable units for this particular study. Again, that's a behavior. So, and we're saying, well, if you've taken at least and completed at least 12 transferable units, you probably intended to transfer. Maybe. The problem is, kind of getting back to your question is, there is overlap between transferable units and degree applicable units. And so it's very possible that when we talk to these students, a lot of them will say, I never intended to transfer. Why are you bothering me? Right? We have a script for that. But we don't know. So we'll see. Did I answer both questions? Did you have a question?
With your students using federal financial aid, do they not need to update their major in order to receive their federal financial aid?
In theory, yes. They're supposed to. But do they? Is somebody staying on top of it? Is the financial aid system linked up with the rest of the system? It's not always the same. Trust me, I didn't say who I was in my former life, but before I started working for the Research and Planning Group, I was an institutional researcher at 3 different California community colleges. So that's how I know some of this stuff from having worked on a campus. But yeah, that would be, you're asking wonderful questions and really obvious kind of questions, like kind of the duh Like, why isn't it? And I'm like, I don't know. Do you have another question?
This row is, hey, we've got a question row here. I think a lot of this resonates with me. I think, so maybe in terms of, as you think about, your question was about, the survey you're working on. One question is at what point do you plan to, in students' pathways, do you plan to administer the survey? So that's one question that might influence what you're asking. But the other two things that jump out to me are one related to this conversation about careers, and I'm wondering just in terms of where career development experiences fits into this framework, how students have been, come to understand what they can do, how they can do it, and how college can help get them there. And I guess the other piece which is related to that is their prior educational experiences, like in the K-12 system, how that fits into to this framework of decision making.
Okay, now you had 3 questions, so I'm not going to remember. So K-12 information is not, because we don't have access to that unless they took dual enrollment classes, or concurrently enrolled classes at the community college. So what would we ask them about their K-12 experience? What would you think that is? Before coming?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Did they know about transfer?
Oh, okay. Because we do have some questions on the survey that talks about, I don't remember the exact wording, but something in terms of when you got here, when you got to the community college, did you already know what you wanted to do? Who helped you? So there's a little bit of that. It doesn't emphasize K-12, what happened there, or what happened before you started attending, but it was kind of like, when you got to us, where were you with your goal? But no, that's a good question in terms of trying to get some understanding. Okay, so that was one. The second one. Oh, no. I knew the answer was no. That's one of the things we, and I don't know if it's any different with all of you, but we don't do a good job with career exploration with our students. Not at all. I mean, a lot of times the answer is just take a bunch of courses and you'll figure it out. And it's like, courses don't always, there's another study from a colleague organization where they talked to students about like, well, how do you pick? And they actually said taking a bunch of courses is the worst way to pick a career. It's a good way to pick a major, but it's not a good way to pick a career. And they were distinguishing between the two. So it's something that we're looking at in terms of, because we're guided pathways, we're going that way in California, and there's at least an acknowledgement that plays a really important role in helping students get on their path a lot sooner and have that momentum. And then the first one. Oh, so it's this group of students. So it's students who are at the gate or near the gate. So not the transferred students. That's another study to find out the ones who were successful. But looking at students, and I think the time frame is people who reach those goals within the last, let's say, 5+ years, but have stopped attending for at least 18 months to like 3 years. Like we can't find them at any community college in the state or university in the country. So we're trying to find those students. And some of them are still enrolled at the community college and some of them aren't. Okay, yes.
So I'm wondering 2 things. I was wondering first if age is under demographics, because transferring to a school that's a couple hundred miles away stereotypically is far easier for somebody who's 20 than who might be 40. And then, so higher age. Thanks. Okay. And then I'm also wondering if you identified any like really high performing pairs. I know you looked at region, but I was wondering if you were able to kind of figure out like who are the shining stars in each one, and are there things there you could replicate?
Do you mean like within a region, like best practice kind of thing? Yeah.
Do we know that students who go from, who try to go from point A to point B, that's a really good path? But the students who go to point C don't do as well, or schools aren't as good at this?
No, we didn't look at that in these data. We probably could, but I do think there's something in the survey that would, because we're asking where were you, we know where they were. Where were you trying to go? So again, we were trying to focus on the students who didn't make it, and that's probably more of a question for the students who did. But we could look at the quantitative data because we have it for the students who transferred. Sorry, excuse me.
Thank you. I'm wondering about work experiences, so whether or not students were working while completing or while attending community college, or if they plan to once they transfer. So, yeah, anything about that. Thank you.
Excellent. That is in the survey because we don't collect that data in our application or really anywhere in our colleges. I mean, there's probably some exceptions, but we don't collect it statewide. So we are asking them both the question of, like, did you work? How much did you work? And how, if you transfer. So there's a lot of questions that start with if you transfer. Would you work? How much would you work? So yes, thank you. Excellent. Yes, I'm going to come around this way and ask you to pass this, sir.
We have a program in Missouri called the A+ program where students can attend if they meet certain criteria in high school, they can attend the community colleges for free for 2 years. And I wondered if you have a program like that in California and how that would maybe impact the survey. Students, affordability, for example, they can spend those 2 years saving money so they can afford the final 2 years or 3 years or whatever it ends up being.
We have a new program called the Promise Program in California, which was originally just for 1 year of free tuition. Now it's being expanded to the first 2 years. There's some limitations on who can get that. I don't know about your program, but you have to be a recent high school graduate, and most of the time you have to go full time. So that, I don't know if I'm curious about the rest of you. Are most of your students part-time or full-time at the community college? Part-time? Part-time? Do you see a problem with this? If we have, at least in California, our number ranges from usually at least 2/3 to 75% of students at any individual college are going part-time. But we have this Promise program, which is fantastic. I'm not, especially because I'm being recorded, I have nothing against the program. It's great for those students who meet the criteria. But what if I live in this district, this high school district, but I want to go to that college in another district? I can't take the Promise with me. It's only for that local high school district. Yours is statewide? Yeah, ours is not. And again, we have these extra criteria. And we have a lot of students who go outside. They don't go to the one right there, especially in urban areas. And again, let's just be honest. I know I'm being recorded, but there are certain colleges that have, let's say, higher success with transfer than others. And if you can get to it, aren't you going to try to go to that one versus the one that's in your neighborhood? If you have transportation to get to that other college, you probably are familiar with this, especially in Fullerton, is kind of in an urban type area in Orange County. So yes, it won't affect this study because of the date, because these programs are still fairly new, and we're dealing with students who were registered before the Promise programs came about. But fingers crossed, it does help. If we did this study in a few more years, we start to see the impact of the Promise programs, but it probably won't play out here. I think we actually have a question. I don't know if it got scrapped because the survey was really long, so we're having to cut it back. But we did have a question that was something like, are you aware of the Promise program? Because we could catch a few people who kind of got in on the very beginnings of it at certain schools, but it's not terribly likely. But I think the question is something like, would it have been nice if you had this available to you? Which, who would say no to free college? So I think we might have scrapped that question because I think we can just assume. All right, what else? Oh, back this way.
No, this one's pretty straightforward. Is all of the students, are they domestic or international, or is it a combined?
I think. That's a great question. I don't know if we factored in international students. I'm going to have to write that one down just to double check. That's great. Yeah. Sorry.
So I'm actually one of the private universities in San Diego. So yeah, not too far. I'm wondering, with all of your data, a lot of our students actually transfer with less than 45 units. So are you factoring in if they have decided to only attend or plan to transfer to a public university, or is there any word of private university in there for data, or is this just strictly public university data?
So the answer is, in that transfer achiever group, we will have captured anyone who transferred to a private university regardless of units. So they're in there. But the second part of what it was is capturing if they planned to transfer to a private university. And so there could be some students who, especially like that momentum group, or even in the transfer explorer group, right? The ones who have somewhere between 12 and 60 units, they could be fine. I mean, again, they've been there for 6 years, so that makes me question how fine they are if they have between those units and they haven't transferred yet. But yeah, we don't have access to their plans other than I showed you the flawed ed goal, but we don't ask, well, where? And a lot of students wouldn't be able to answer that question anyway until the very end. And we have no like exit survey, which would be great if we had something to ask students as they're exiting us. What are you doing? Where are you going? You need some help? You know, something. Though there are some colleges, not in California, maybe there's some here, where they have a whole effort to reach out to students with 45 units or more. And and there's like a whole purposeful kind of thing where it's like, okay, you're getting close. You need any help? You're missing something? You know what you need to do? Have you applied for transfer? Have you something? Are you looking for a job? You need help with a resume? So it's a whole focus on, well, what do people need to be doing in their last 15 units, right? That's something that would be awesome if we ever did so, and then we could start to capture that. But no. So at least you are counted in the top group, but nothing we can do about intention for private. I'm sorry. Okay. So I've got. Yes. Yeah. Exactly. All right, so just to wrap this up, thank you so much for your input. This was super helpful. Again, we're still shaping this, and that's why we want to go out. I just want to tell you very quickly to wrap up. This is the phase 2. These are the research questions. Again, trying to all of these boil down to why haven't you transferred, right? We're doing both an online survey with a very large group of students. We've gotten 31 community colleges out of the 114. There's technically 115, but 114 actual functioning colleges. You can ask me about that. I'm not saying that on the recording. So we figure that's a pretty good sample. They represent all different kinds of colleges across the state. And we're doing, like I said, this online survey, and then we're going to do some interviews where we'll be able to talk with the students. So that's going to be starting very soon this semester. But I want to leave you with this. So when we first started going out and doing these presentations, everybody was like, ask them this and do this, and they're excited about, that qualitative piece. And it occurred to us at some point, you don't have to wait for us. Don't wait for us to finish our study. You can start right now by looking at your data and finding, again, on the community college campus, finding these students on your campus or that aren't on your campus anymore. So we would just encourage you to look at, using and if you go on our website, the full report has all the technical data. And again, it's written from our system, but you can probably translate it into yours in terms of the variables. And like I said, it has all the definitions and everything. But look on your own campus to see if this is a group worth you reaching out to and trying to help. Like the thing I was just saying about students with 45 units or more. Are there things you could be doing to help these students with that? You'll learn, like, do they just need one thing? Is it just one thing that's holding me? Because a lot of students, I think, are getting stuck. And again, I say a lot. I don't know what the number is because they can't get that last class. It's offered when they work. It's offered, it's only offered once every 2 years. There's probably a lot of class scheduling issues that are preventing some of our students from getting that last class or two that they need to transfer. But I said, reach out to them, find out what's holding them up, and then see if you can't help them. Right? So again, don't wait for us to finish. I'll stay for questions if you like, because I think we are right at 4 o'clock. Boom. This is our website if you want to go, and like I said, The paper that goes with this should be released within the next month. That has all the details and all the tables and whatnot. So all of that will be on our website. But you can find the phase 1 stuff on our website right now. So I'll leave that up for anyone.